to do something a little different, something that we don't do as often as maybe we should. We're going to read the Bible together. We call it responsive reading, except that responsive reading usually means the guy that says something and then you call as an answer. Now, we're just going to read collectively. So I hope that you will join me in this. You can remain seated for this. Do sing out loud because it's going to be on the video. Okay? Here we go. The Israelites lived among the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold against the hands of king of Aram. I'm sorry, you have read better than that in times past, haven't you? That wasn't very good. Let's try this one, okay? Together. Elisha went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going up on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" And he turned around, and when he saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore 42 of the boys. Let's face it, there are just some scriptures that don't work as well in a congregational setting. But if you will trust me, I'd like to try one more. Let's read this one. If I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Right here, in the midst of a letter filled with dirty laundry items, one after another, from a church that has gone so wild we think they're never going to get their act together, comes an oasis, comes a place of refuge, and words that flow from the Apostle Paul that are among the most beautiful ever written about the subject of love, perhaps even rivaling Jesus' own words in John 3:16. Here we have words that are recited at weddings, that are read at anniversaries, that are prayed over the crib containing the newborn child. Words that are preached by just about every preacher from about every pulpit in the land. Words that will never pass away, that are written to a church that was struggling. Words that speak about the greatest thing of all. The Apostle Paul tells us about love. In the course of our study of the letters that he wrote to the Corinthians, we have chosen to take a little different tact from what most scholars would do, where they love to look at the microscopic, the myopic, the word-to-word, and the verse-to-verse approach, treetop level. We thought we'd do something a little higher, more of a bird's eye view, where we just focus on the main themes that go through this letter. For instance, the main theme that Jesus Christ must always be in charge. He must be Lord of all. The main theme that our relationship together as brothers and sisters is way more important than us demanding our rights and wanting our way. The main theme that says our worship will not be authentic if we're focused on the legalistic or the trivial, instead of Christ being the head and all of the body parts working together. We've done something else a little different in this Christians Gone Wild series, where most preachers and most teachers would divide up the word a certain way. We've kind of done it differently. And a classic example is where we are right now, because we looked at chapters 11, 12, and 14. They seem to be focused on the problems the Corinthians were having with worship and how we can learn from them with our head worship, our heart worship, our hands in worship. But we skipped over chapter 13. Not because it doesn't say anything about worship, it does, but because the 13 verses of the 13th chapter are so significant it deserves a session all its own. It truly is a shelter in the storm of a church problem after another church problem after another one. I think Paul might agree with me, because he bookends this chapter. He sets it up with a verse leading into it and a verse leading out of it. The very last verse of chapter 12 says, "But now I want to lay out a far better way for you," preparing for chapter 13. And then when chapter 13 is done, he says, "So go after a life of love, as if your life depended on it, because it does. Give yourselves to the gifts that God gives you." It's almost as if Paul says, stop for just a minute. We've been dealing with all these problems. Let's take a breath. Let's smell the roses of the greatest gift that Jesus gives his church and his people. So Paul gives us a master class of love. He divides this up in 3 different ways. To begin with, he says, "Oh, love is essential." Verses 1 through 3. You remember the words that you just read. Love is the gas that powers the car, the yeast that permeates the bread, the blood that gives life to the body. You can use whatever metaphor you want, but it probably won't be as good as the imagery that Paul uses when he says love is the greatest thing. And do you remember that gift, Corinthians, that you thought was so important? The gift of ecstatic utterances that are unintelligible to everyone. The gift of tongues. Or do you remember the gift that some men have? They are great orators, and they speak in such a way that moves mountains. Or do you hear the voices of angels that only God hears right now, but one day all men will hear and will marvel? All of those things are nothing. Not a one of them are worth anything if they are without love. In fact, they are like a clanging cymbal. You know the old love song, "Love Be Tender"? Or, "Love is a many splendored thing"? Or, think of your own favorite love song. Get it in your ears. Can you hear it? Now imagine that song being played on only one instrument, a cymbal. Doesn't work very well, does it? And the reason for that is A cymbal doesn't know a melody. But love is the melody that gives meaning to life. You know, I think Paul used that imagery of the cymbal, especially for the Corinthians. It meant more to them than maybe it means to us, because all that pagan worship, all that prostitution worship in Corinth, as immoral as that city was, that worship was usually accompanied by clanging gongs and sounding cymbals. It is as if Paul is saying, the authentic worship, which is love to Jesus Christ, compared to that ritualistic pagan noise that others are making, is like a glorious symphony filled with instruments versus a single soulless solo cymbal. Music tells us how important love is. Without that love, life is just hollow and noise. This is why love is so essential. But Paul goes on to tell us why love has credentials in verses 4 through 7. Oh, the world has done such a marvelous job of distorting love, of disfiguring love. It's understandable why you and I might go, wait, what really is authentic love? Paul tells us. I want you to read these words together out loud with me. Here we go. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Right there is the recipe with the ingredient list that is love. And it does not matter how bad our world gets. Those words will always ring true. And for any of us who read those words, we are remembered what authentic love is. A mother with a newborn child knows those words as she will do anything to raise that little one up. She knows that love is patient. Love is kind. Those are the words for a Christian home in an unchristian world that keeps it together, knowing that love doesn't just fly off at the handle or just keeps a record of every transgression. Those are the words that are the secret for an elderly couple who has for decades been a beacon of faithfulness and love for the world to see. They don't choose evil. They choose truth, and they protect, trust, hope, and persevere. These are the words of love. Max Lucado once preached a sermon at a very difficult moment in his church. And he said, once upon a time when I was a young preacher, I told the church, you need to seek out the fruits of the Spirit. You know, love, joy, peace, patience, and so on. Grow in the fruits of the Spirit. But now I'm an older preacher, and I know better. Because you see, what Lucado said next applies to us today. He said, It doesn't matter how much determination you screw up. Today I will be peaceful. Today I will be joyful. I will have patience and I will have it right now. It doesn't work that way, does it? If you try your best to pull yourself up from your bootstraps and to be loving or to find love, but if you seek to be part of the one who is love, if you intertwine your life with the one who is the branch, that's how you gain the fruits of the Spirit, and the greatest of them all is love. And this makes perfect sense, because Jesus is the master of patience, the master of control, the master of truth. You cling to Jesus, and all these things will just naturally come. Because Jesus, most of all, never fails. That's why his love is eternal. And when we love like Jesus, our love will be as well. One more passage. Let's read it together. Love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, when we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. You may remember towards the beginning of the year, we shared together in a sermon series called a Triple Trilogy. And one of the trilogies was faith, hope, and love. But I want you to notice something here, that there is that little word called the greatest. And the way we look at that today is different than the way Paul meant it. For the greatest is not meant to be exclusionary. The greatest is love, apart from all others. That's not what Paul is telling us. He's saying the greatest is inclusionary. That with love, all the other things come together. And without it, nothing remains that is worthwhile. You are looking at a $500 egg. That's how much that thing costs. After all of the expenses, I counted all the receipts that my wife incurred raising those chickens. There was the coop. There was the feed. There was the fencing. There's the cost of the chickens themselves. And the list goes on and on and on. I think that we need to add a verse somewhere in the 13 verses of chapter 13 that says, love is chickens. Because sometimes I think she loves those birds more than me.
Love is expensive.
Yeah, they're less expensive.
You can see that the canopy over the coop has seen better days. Not to worry, she's already ordered another one, which means that egg is even more expensive than ever before. But are you aware that that canopy can teach us a lesson about the love of Jesus? Once upon a time, it was brand new, without any rips or tears. It kept the weather out. No more. But Jesus' love is different. He brings me to the banqueting table, and his banner over me is love. The canopy that is the love of Jesus will never deteriorate, will never have any rips in it. It will stay there for eternity, protecting us. His love will never fail. Do you realize that the gift is never superior to the giver? And as much as we love, as much as we can see how wondrous is the love of Jesus, it only attests to the greatness of God's Son, of our Savior and Lord. Do you know him? If you do, then every word in chapter 13 should resonate with you. There is always room for improvement. Every one of us today can use that blueprint as a way to become closer to Christ. So I encourage you, draw nearer to the lover of your soul so that you can grow the fruits that he wants in you. And the greatest is love. And it all begins with choosing him for the first time. Do you have a decision to make? We'd love to help you with it. All you need to do is come as we stand. As together we sing.
Service to him belongs. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. Love lifted me. When nothing else could help. Love lifted me.